Hello and welcome back to Goofs and Sonic Boom. Today, we'll be moving on to episode 2, Can an Evil Genius Crash on Your Couch for a Few Days? Before we start, I just wanted to say that this is in no way intended to tear down Sonic Boom. I love this show, and most of these goofs are near impossible to notice in casual viewing. These goof videos are only meant for fun and trivia. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into the goofs. The episode starts off with Sonic sleeping over at Tails' house, only to be interrupted by Eggman at the door. Eggman asks if he can stay over due to his lair being destroyed in the storm, to which Sonic eventually agrees. In the morning, Knuckles, Amy, and Sticks come to visit, and this is where we see the first goof. As the trio enters, Sticks' eyelashes disappear for a brief moment. After Sonic explains why Eggman is there, the doctor requests his Salmon Eggs Benedict. When Tails first holds it up, it's steaming quite significantly, but by the time he brings it over to the table, there is no steam.
There is no steam.
There's no way it could have cooled off that fast. Now I could nitpick and point out that Eggman and the food tray aren't seen in the reflection on the table, but that's more about the given graphics engine than an animation oversight, so I won't count that as a goof. So then we get a montage of what Sonic and Tails' lives are like living with Eggman, and there are a few goofs to talk about in this vacuuming part. First of all, Sonic's shoes are sunk unrealistically deep into the rug. He stands on the rug correctly in this clip, so there's what it should look like. Second, Sonic is moving the vacuum back and forth here as if he's vacuuming the couch. However, the vacuum is not touching said couch. Third, on the bottom right of the screen, the floorboard texture is stretched out of whack. My guess is that the texture on this part of the floor is incomplete because it's normally covered by the counter, which they moved out of the way to make room for this shot. Something else we can notice on that same part of the floor is this odd red marking. I wouldn't count this as a goof, but it's very bizarre. It appears to be a glowing red shoe print, which reminds me of when Jim Carrey scanned Sonic's footprints in the Paramount movie. Those very wrong footprints that should not exist. Anyway, if you have any idea what this marking is, let me know. So finally moving on from that section, Sonic and Tails discuss with Amy how difficult of a roommate Eggman is. But when the camera angle changes, Amy shifts position on the seat. First she's sitting on the right cushion, then she's sitting in the middle. Later that day, Amy gets Eggman to have a discussion with Sonic. But looking closely, Sonic isn't actually sitting on the couch, he's hovering slightly over it. Also, Amy, Sonic, and Tails' positions on the couch aren't consistent. If we pay attention to the gap between the cushions, we can tell that they shift around quite a bit throughout the scene. And in this shot, Sonic and Eggman are both floating in their own unique ways. So from now on, Eggman promises to be a more considerate guest by doing things such as fluffing Tails' pillow. But hold on, the pattern on the pillow is on the bottom at first, but in the close-up, it's flipped up to the top. Okay, so this board game section has several minor goofs that would be too boring to explain in detail, so I'll just rapid fire them. In the first shot, this game piece is set next to the board, but in the second shot, it's not only on the board, but sunk almost entirely into it. Then we see that Eggman is about to place his piece on this green space, but the camera switches and he places it on a completely different space. A couple shots later, the piece is now in the correct spot, but it's also floating. And the other piece is sunk a bit into the board. And for the last goof in this scene, the game board has become bigger. It's now hanging over the edge of the table, which it wasn't doing before. So moving on, that morning, Eggman finally decides to reveal his true intentions for staying over, and gives a very pompous introduction. Now this goof is pretty hard to see, but if we look closely, Eggman is floating in front of the rock instead of standing on top of it. Most likely a masking oversight. Now as Sonic walks outside, we see that he's wearing his communicator, which he doesn't wear in any other part of the episode, only this one shot. I must admit that I did not discover this goof myself. I found it on the Sonic Wiki, which is also how I knew about the eyelash goof. So while Eggman is explaining his scheme, there is something very wrong with Amy's face. The dip down between her eyes is stretched down to her muzzle. I can prove it's not supposed to be this way because it corrects itself when she blinks, and Stick's eyelashes disappear again. Tails appears to be missing the shadows underneath his eyes, but don't worry, I'll fix it. Anyway, due to a goof in Obliterator-Bot's programming, he sets off to actually destroy Eggman's fortress, and everyone pursues in an attempt to stop him. But while they're discussing a strategy, their aircrafts shift position from shot to shot.
By activating 2 kill switches at the same time, they're inside the lair. There, and there.
I'd say those are outside the lair, but I'll give them a pass on that. One thing I won't give a pass on, however, is that this piece of debris is floating. So the group puts their plan into action, and we don't see any goofs for over a minute and 20 seconds. But when Eggman blows his kazoo and we see a zoomed out view of the lair, it's completely intact, and both aircrafts are missing. And finally, now that his fortress really was destroyed, Eggman approaches Team Sonic to repeat his initial request. Now notice that there is no lawn chair at first, but after Eggman shows up carrying nothing but 2 suitcases, one magically appears. And so, after Sonic gives a subtle refusal to Eggman's request, the episode comes to a close. There you have it. That made for about 24 goofs in episode 2. Just like last time, if you know of any other goofs that I didn't point out, let me know in the comments below. Until next time, thanks for watching. When Tails first holds his up...